Express is a library for Node.js, and thus far we have a Node project where we're only able to use Node core modules. To add third-party library, we need to convert this to a, you could say, managed project. For this, let me quit the server here. And now let's use npm, a tool which was also installed together with Node.js. npm stands for Node Package Manager, and indeed it is a tool for managing packages for Node applications. So for adding third-party libraries, you could say. Actually, you will later see in the course that we don't just use it in Node apps, we can also use it in frontend apps, in the React app, but for the moment, let's focus on Node. Now, to use npm, to install packages here, we first of all need to convert this here to a managed project, and we do so by running npm init. Now, we're asked a couple of questions with that, and you can simply hit enter everywhere to just confirm this. And once you're done with all these questions, you get a package.json file. This holds some general configuration, which is all fine, but more importantly, this will store all dependencies we will install. And to install a dependency, in this project folder, we run npm install, then the name of the dependency. In our case, Express is the name, just Express, like this. And then also here, -- save. This will tell npm which kind of dependency this is. -- save for a core app dependency, which we use in our application code, or -- save -dev if it's a development only dependency. So some tool which helps us during development, but which we don't need thereafter. So here it's -- save because Express will make up a core part of our application. And here I actually get an error that I can't install a package under a package which is already named Express. And indeed, here the name was Express. Let's rename this to Node Express in the package.json file and repeat this npm install command. And now it will go ahead and add this Express dependency to this project. To be precise, it will do two things. It added this dependencies entry here in package.json, and it added a Node modules folder. In that folder, you'll find the Express package under E, but you'll also find a lot of other packages. These are dependencies of Express and dependencies of dependencies. Now, this folder can get quite big, so whenever you share your project with someone else, it's quite common to actually delete the Node modules folder so that only your code files are there. And now to recreate it, because you have these entries in package.json, you can just run npm install, and this will go ahead and install all the dependencies with the versions that are mentioned here into your folder. It will recreate the Node modules folder, therefore. Here it is. So now we get Express installed. How can we utilize Express? Well, we can utilize Express to simplify this listening to incoming requests and doing different things for different types of requests. Because besides parsing the data, which is cumbersome, it's also cumbersome that we have to check the method like this. If we have more and more methods and even more different URLs which we want to check, we have to add more and more if statements to this single request listener which we have. Not ideal. So let's actually get rid of all of that so that we have an empty app.js file again, and let's use Express for that. Here, I require Express, just as before. I just specified a name here. This is not a core module, but the installed module. I require it by the name of the module, in this case Express. And now this thing which we get here in the Express constant turns out to be a function. You'll learn things like that in the official docs of packages, in this case in the official docs of Express. This function will give us an app object. So we'll call Express as a function and store the result, which is a rich object full of functionalities and features, in this app constant. One feature which we have here is again a listen method. So here I will again specify the port 5000. What we don't have to do here is call create server. Express will do that under the hood and basically expose that server object enriched with a lot of other functionalities on this app which I'm storing here. So now with that, we could execute the file again and have a running server, but of course one which doesn't do much. Now, to handle our get route, when I just enter localhost 5000 like this, which currently is not supported because I have no routes or no supported requests at all here, to handle that, we have to register a so-called middleware here in Express.js. Because Express has one core philosophy, which is basically that every incoming request is funneled through a bunch of middleware functions, normal functions in the end, which are able to get data out of the request or manipulate the request even, and also manipulate the response and eventually send it back. That's the idea behind Express. You have a bunch of functions which can be called on incoming requests, and every function can do something with this incoming request or with this response which is about to be sent. You can only send one response per request though. Now, a middleware is registered by calling the use method on app. Use is a method provided by the Express library on this app object. In its simplest form, this takes a function. A function, here I'm using an arrow function, which takes 3 parameters. A request object, which is the incoming request, basically an object similar to what we got with vanilla Node.js, but it is an object enriched with some extra data. A response object, also similar to what we had in the plain vanilla Node app, but again enriched with extra functionalities. And the third parameter is a new one. This is a next function, which you call if you don't want to send a response to this middleware, but instead you want to forward the request to the next middleware in line. If you're not calling next, then any middleware after this middleware, if we had more than one, will not be reached by this request. So you should always call next unless you are in a middleware where you want to send back a response. Since you may only send one response anyways, there is no need to execute any other middlewares thereafter. So here we could create a middleware which sends back a response, and here we have a send method actually, where we can have our body where I now again want to render that form. So on that form we have a method of post, and then in there we had an input of type text with a name of username, and we had a button opening and closing tags where we had create user, and that button was of type submit. That's the setup we had before. Now we have it again. With that, if we now save this and we execute this file again, and I go to localhost 5000 again, we see that form, which is great. Now that form is of course nice to have, but it would also be nice if we now could do something useful with the post request. For that, let's add another middleware. A middleware which is also reached, and I will copy that middleware function, and for the moment I will just console log middleware here, and then call next, so that this middleware does not send back a response, but does something, in this case just log something, and then forwards the request to the next middleware in line. Let's restart the server by quitting it and restarting, and if we now send this request again, you will see middleware here. By the way, you could also see this twice here if the browser is by default also requesting a fav icon, which my browser is not here at this point. Then this fav icon request would also go through the middleware. You can just ignore it. Otherwise, you will just see one middleware log here. So now we have that extra middleware, but this doesn't do anything. Well, what could we do in here? We could parse our request body. For that, we could bring back what we had before. Our on listener, where we get our chunks of data. Then here we have the body, which is an empty string initially. Then we basically append our chunks of data there. And we also have the end listener here, which executes when we are done parsing the incoming request body. And in there, I can get my username by calling body split on the equal sign and extracting the second element. And now I want to add a request body field, and I'll do this just with the dot notation on the request object. I'll dynamically add a body property and set this to an object where I set the name key to my extracted username. And thereafter, I call next. Please note that I call next inside of the end handler so that we only commence to the next middleware if we're done parsing the incoming request data and not earlier. So now we go on to the next middleware in line, and in that next middleware, the request body should be available. So in that second middleware, let's check if request body is a thing, if that is set. And if it is set, I will return response send return so that the code thereafter doesn't execute, because I either want to send this response or send that. Alternatively, we could wrap this into an else block, but we don't need to do that if we simply return here. And here, I want to have my h1 tag, then output request body.name. .name is the property where I'm storing the username. And then close the h1 tag. If we do this, let's restart the server, go to this page again, hit enter, and I get undefined. So that does not work. Why does it not work? Because I'm always setting request body. Even if we're handling a normal GET request, which has no attached data, this end event listener will fire. So request body will always be set, in this case just to an object where name holds undefined as a value. So I will tweak this and check if username is a thing, if this is truthy, and only set request body if it is a thing. Now let's restart again. Hit enter again, and we see the form. Let's enter menu, create a user, and we see that here. So now we're doing the same as before, but with Express. Some things maybe got a bit easier, but overall we didn't gain much, mostly because we still manually have to parse the data here, right? And we still need an if check to see which kind of response we want to send. So these are two things we want to improve. And actually there is a third thing. Always having to restart that server, that's annoying. Let's get rid of that too.